Hi there, this is TJR.
And this is Robert Kinsler.
And we're going to talk about a subject that has made some recent headlines. We've had two examples recently of this particular, of the subject of plagiarism when it comes to music. Now, of course, recently, the first one being the entire legal suit from Marvin Gaye versus Robin Thicke for the song Blurred Lines. And versus Gaye's song "Gotta Give It Up."
Gotta Give It Up.
Another example was the legal actions with against Sam Smith for his song "Stay With Me" versus Tom Petty's '80s hit "I Won't Back Down."
Back Down.
So let's start here with "Blurred Lines" versus "Gotta Give It Up,"
because that's got so much attention.
What do you?
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts, your impressions.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd heard the Marvin Gaye song, obviously, and I had heard the Pharrell Williams, Robin Thicke hit and stuff like that. But it was when I was listening to the radio show after the jury verdict, I guess for 7.4 million was announced. They were playing them both next to, like back to back, and I go, oh my God, it sounds almost identical. How could someone not hear it? But apparently, the lawsuit really revolved around just the sheet music. For some legal reasons, they weren't actually able to play the recordings, right, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know all the details now. Like I said, I was listening to a news program about it. But what just blew me away is how similar it did sound. And yeah, I think the jury's decision seemed like it was pretty accurate, from what I heard.
Now, of course, like you, I have not heard the actual legal evidence.
Yeah, I have not. Yeah, I have not. Yeah.
Just by listening to it, I'm gonna be breaking ranks here. I really didn't feel there was a case, in my personal opinion. I listened to "Gotta Give It Up," and I listened to "Blurred Lines," and I hear a similarity in their grooves, in the way the underlying groove is behind each song. Melodically, I think they're two different songs.
Okay.
When I hear the lead vocals, I hear the melody line of the vocals, I think it's two completely different songs. There are some similarities, but to me personally, they were different enough. But once again, I did not hear the evidence presented in court and how that evidence was presented. So I don't know how I might have sided had I actually been there on the jury. But I have certainly heard much more compelling cases where, like, oh my gosh, the similarities are just too close. To where I would feel like, yes, automatically I feel like, yeah, you've definitely got something here. I guess the question is, was it deliberate or not?
Yeah, yeah. And that's something that I don't think we just don't know. Yeah, but you're right. If you can prove the intent, like, hey, I really like this song, I like this groove. This Marvin Gaye song is a classic. I love it. I'm going to see if I can kind of emulate the groove or what he's doing here. But again, that's really hard to know. But over the years, I think we've both heard it. Let's think of one example here, like "What I Like About You" by the Romantics and "R.O.C.K. in the USA" by John Mellencamp. They basically have the same. What do I want to say? The chord,
the same
driving
chord
progression and stuff, or like "Wild Thing" and God, I know there's some other songs like "Louie Louie" or something like that, very similar. But again, I don't think that any of those songs got into any kind of trouble. I don't know why some do and some don't. But it is very interesting. But I think now, in this age, I think there is this heightened sense that everything is so out there with the internet. Everything is so. And people have such short, memory. So it's like, I came up with this. Maybe they're thinking, hey, it'll be new to people today. But I can understand artists wanting to, or their families wanting to protect, their songs and that they are unique creations. And I kind of get that. But I don't, like I said, without sitting in the jury box, it's really hard for me to know.
But you felt personally that when you heard the two, that they were too similar. Your opinion?
I felt they were very similar when I heard them. Yeah.
Now, you said, I don't know why some songs don't have any problems, never get attacked, and why some do. And the reason is because it's really up to the person who feels their copyright is being infringed upon to do something about it.
Right.
You don't do anything about it, nothing's going to happen. That's what it really comes down to. Getting back to the subject of intent, does intent matter? Is what I would want to ask. Does intent matter? Because you can copy something subconsciously, and I've done it. I released a song that I wrote, and put it out there. I'm not going to name the song. It's in my catalog. If you go to my Spotify my music on Spotify. You can go listen to it. It's out there. It's in my catalog. If you go to my website, I have a playlist of just all my music. You can go there. But there's a song I released, wrote it, recorded it, thought it was wholly original. After it was released, someone said to me, "Doesn't it sound kind of like that song by so-and-so?" And I went, "Oh, holy, you're right. It does." Did I intend it? No. Subconsciously, though, you know, I picked up on it somewhere, and subconsciously, I copied it to a certain extent. It was a similarity, much to my embarrassment. You know. Now, I'm not selling 1 million copies, so that original recording artist isn't going to care at this point. And even if I did, maybe they wouldn't care. Maybe they wouldn't even hear the similarity. Someone had to point it out to me. This does happen. People copy stuff subconsciously and aren't aware of it. I don't know how many times I have heard songs. A good example, let's take like the opening to Tiny Dancer by Elton John, and let's take the opening to Jungle Town by Bruce Springsteen. Don't those piano intros sound very similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make that case. Yeah.
Are the songs completely different?
Very, very different.
Yeah, they have similarities, but they're different. So, you know, at what point do we say intent? Because even if you don't intend to do it, you can still do it. Yeah,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think, like you're saying, I know we've both thought about like that very famous case where George Harrison was successfully sued for My Sweet Lord, and I think by the Chiffons, She's So Fine, or
He's
something.
So Fine, yeah.
Or He's So Fine, excuse me. So, and it's funny, and I can recall at the time listening to both songs, and I didn't hear enough of a similarity where I say, I can't believe they really went after George Harrison thinking that he would do that. And then he famously kind of answered the results of that case with a song called This Song, where he was making fun of the system and like, this song, there's nothing, you know, and then he goes on to say, you know, this song is my, you know, and he in a cleverly kind of says, you know, it's not copying anybody, it's not this and that. And it is unfortunate because I don't think he would have done that unless, and George Harrison just never had a reputation like he was a thief or anything like that.
I don't think he ever intentionally meant to either. But I personally can hear the similarities when I listen to, you know, he's so fine, sha-la-la-la-la, he's so fine, sha-la-la-la-la. You can hear the similarities. My sweet Lord, hallelujah, oh my Lord, hallelujah. And then even when you go to the next part, you can hear the similarities. I really want to see you, hallelujah. I forget what the lyrics are of the Chiffon line, but the melody's similar. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-la-la.
And it's funny. It's
very similar.
And it's funny.
I hear the similarities instantly, and I can see where they would say, hey, I think he copied us. The Beatles were huge fans of the girl groups, both the American and the British girl groups, like the Chiffons. So, yeah, they listened to, like everybody else, they were fans, they listened to stuff.
So what you're saying is what may have happened is he just kind of soaked that in, and it was somewhere in his musical vocabulary to do that.
And a decade or so later, he writes My Sweet Lord, unintentionally copies certain elements of the melody, you know. But, and here's the question. At what point does it become plagiarism? And at what point do we have to, how paranoid do we have to get? Now, I, myself personally, as a songwriter, because of this gig where I'm listening to all this music now, I'm listening to more albums now in a month than I used to listen to in a year. I'm really afraid now that I'm going to subconsciously, unintentionally copy something. I'm actually kind of afraid to write a song nowadays, to be honest.
You have to be so cautious in your approach.
I mean, at what point, you know, how chilling of effect does this have? Now, for instance, you know, Robin Thicke's attorneys are saying this is having a very chilling effect on the industry, you know. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting because, does this start like a trend where all of a sudden all these artists, you know, these original songwriters start saying, hey, you're taking my ideas, you've lifted from my song. You know, I guess we'll find out. I think time will inevitably tell whether that is going to be the case or not. I don't know if I have a thought right now where I'd see this happening that much. I was surprised when it happened to George Harrison many years ago. I was surprised that it happened. And again, here this is almost like history repeating itself, but it is 20 years or 25 years later. It's far, you know, long after the fact. So I'll be curious to see what does happen. You know, what do you think? Do you think that this is a chilling effect?
It could, potentially, but it also could make us just all a whole lot more careful. You know, that we really think first before we start copying something, or before that we take some time to like, hey, show it to your friends. What do you think of this? How's this sound? Let other people hear it first before you release it. Does this sound like anything you've heard before? Paul McCartney felt certain when he wrote Yesterday that he was copying something somewhere. He couldn't put his finger on it. He felt like, I've heard this before. I know I've heard this before. I know I'm copying something. I just can't tell where. He played it for everybody he could, and everybody said, no, I've never heard this before. So he released it. Yesterday, of course, is now probably the most played song in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one's ever taken him to court. No one's ever said, hey, you copied this. But he felt for certain somewhere in his mind that he had copied it somewhere.
Maybe it was such an undeniable melody, such a strong song. Yeah, obviously that he felt like, hey, you know, it can't be new, but it turned out that it was.
He figured it couldn't be because just the melody was so strong. But you know, it could have a chilling effect. It could also make people a lot more careful. One of the things that has happened once the digital era came along is it made it very easy to sample stuff and use it. Hip-hop, of course, does it a lot. I see a lot of pop singers that are here today and gone tomorrow that sample a song and then put a new lyric over it. But they sample a familiar song. There was some female pop singer who sampled Paul McCartney's Listen to What the Man Said. She sampled the music directly from the original recording and then put a lyric over it. And what the general public at large doesn't realize is that when you do this, if you're going to sample, you know, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees and then rap over it, you have to get the permission of the original artist. You have to share. You have to get their permission, and you do have to share the songwriting royalties with them. You can't just take it. But the general public doesn't realize that. I think somewhere along the way, the general public thinks, oh, music is interchangeable. You can take anybody's music, and if you put something different on top of it, it's yours now. I think the general public. Maybe I'm wrong, but I sometimes think that a lot of the general public thinks this because they hear, you know, somebody rapping over Saturday Night Fever, you know, over Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, and they think, oh yeah, anybody can do this. Well, you can do it, but there are certain things you have to do first. And had Robin Thicke and Pharrell and T.I. Had they realized the similarities themselves, I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't.
Yeah, maybe they did.
But had they realized the similarities, you know, they might have had the foresight to say, "Hey, let's contact the Marvin Gaye estate. Say, hey, we notice there's a lot of similarities here, so we need to acknowledge that, and we need to include you in the songwriting. You know, we're not, you know, we don't want to be accused of stealing. We want to just." We realize this sounds very similar, and we'd realize it even after the fact.
And maybe that's the effect rather than a chilling effect. Maybe it'll just get, like you said earlier, it'll just get artists to do their homework a little bit more. You know, not to, you know, I know we've both lamented that now in this digital age, the internet, a lot of artists are doing it by yourself kind of thing. You are forced almost to be part music attorney, part-time artist, part-time songwriter, part-time recording engineer. You have to kind of, you do your own marketing, you know, you have to wear all these hats, and unfortunately that, you know, that may be the case for some of the smaller artists, but somebody, you know, like a big artist that, you know, they do have the resources to make sure that cover their bases, like, hey, you know what, let's make sure this doesn't sound like something else, you know.
Now let's look at the other recent case, Sam Smith versus Tom Petty. Your thoughts, first of all, the similarities. What do you think?
Yeah, no, on this one, I'm not, you know, I haven't really listened to them back to back.
Okay.
And I'd like to. And I know you brought that one up today, and we didn't have a chance to listen to it. But that one, I don't have any strong feelings on.
Personally, no, like I said, I loved Sam Smith's Stay With Me when I first, I thought, hey, great song. It didn't occur to me until someone pointed it out to me, and then I went, oh yeah, maybe that's why I reacted so strongly to Stay With Me, because the chorus does sound melodically like I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, you know. And I thought, oh yeah, I can definitely hear that. Now, however, this case worked out quite differently. Tom Petty's legal people, contacted Sam Smith's legal people, and they just said, you know, you're right, it does. We're sorry. We're going to include, you know, the song was written by Tom Petty and one other individual whose, I'm sorry, name escapes me at the moment. I'm not going to take the time to look it up here, but they said, we're going to include you as the songwriters on Stay With Me, and you're now, I should get a share of the royalties on the song. Fine. It's all good. You know, and that, it was all worked out.
And that's what I hope is the effect that happens in the future, that, like you said, if you're, let's say you're going to do a song and you say, you know what, maybe it sounds a little bit close to this artist, you contact them or their people, and then you make all this happen. Yeah,
but sometimes you don't realize you've done it. That's the thing. I do not believe that Sam Smith, he co-wrote that song, that him and the individual he co-wrote with, that they deliberately set out to plagiarize Tom Petty. I'm sure they probably heard that song back in the 80s. They probably heard it, you know, over the years that hits get recycled. You hear them over. You hear them. You hear songs, music everywhere nowadays. You hear it when you're shopping.
Right.
You know, you hear it at the mall and stuff. So I'm sure they heard that song somewhere, and somewhere along the way that got embedded in their subconscious. And when they wrote "Stay With Me," they unintentionally copied the melody to "I Won't Back Down."
Yeah.
And so I don't feel it was deliberate. And I'm sure they were just as surprised too, like, oh, you know, just like I was when someone came to me. That's why I can sympathize, because it's happened to me. Someone said, yeah, this sounds just like, doesn't it sound kind of like that one?
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've already released it. It's already out there.
It's already out there.
What do you do? It's done. It's done deal. So I think it's to a certain extent, whoever feels they've been infringed upon is going to have to be, to a certain extent, understanding and realize that not everybody tries to deliberately steal.
Yeah.
And, you know, deliberate theft is when, like, okay, you know, music and lyrics, this is the same song.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but there is, like I said, Chuck Berry went after the Beach Boys for Surfing USA. And he was just simply put on as a songwriter. It worked very much like the Tom Petty Sam Smith case, you know. Don't know if it
that
was
seems like a very good good solution.
What else could they do?
And probably what will be the the end result of all this, our whole discussion, is probably that's what will happen, that at least when it comes to like the labels and the big music attorneys, they'll find a happy medium and a way to make this work. You know, like, hey, look, it's not always, like you're saying, it's not always intentional. The artist may have it may have been something that very in the dark recesses of the mind, it just came up. And then you simply credit the person that needs to be credited. They get a percentage of the royalties and stuff, and everybody's good.
And when is it coincidence?
Yeah.
That's the thing. When is it just plain out coincidence? It does happen.
It does.
I was listening. I'm not going to mention the artist's name, but there was a female singer-songwriter I'm a huge fan of. I was listening to one of her songs, and I'm not mentioning names because it's never come up. But there was a midsection one of her songs where a melody that was in the middle of the song, the musical instrumental break, was almost identical to a very popular instrumental song from the early 60s. And I didn't realize it. Someone else pointed out to me. I said, oh, yeah, you're right. You know, and I to this day, I've always kind of wondered about it. But no, nothing's ever come of it. And, you know, like I said, the original artist who feels they're being infringed upon has to do something about it.
Right.
And I want to say something, too. While I disagree that Blurred Lines is plagiarizing, got to give it up. I personally disagree with it. I support any music artist or their estate, since Marvin Gaye has passed on, or their estate, their right to defend their copyright to the full extent of the law. I do support that, irregardless of what I personally think, whether the case has merit. I do personally support your right to do it, to defend it as rigorously as you want to. And, you know, Pete Townsend, I think, could have gone after One Direction for the opening of the best song ever, because the opening to best song ever sounds way too much like the opening to Bob O'Reilly.
Right, it does. Yeah.
He chose not to.
He chose, yeah.
Now after the opening, the two songs are completely different.
They are.
You know, but he chose not to. He just said, "Oh, I'm glad they liked us so much they wanted to pay tribute to us." He just didn't care enough.
And it's going to come, like you know, it's going to come up to the artists and how they want to work it out, and their business people and all that stuff, because there are a lot of business people associated in the music industry when you go up the ladder. So, yeah.
Let me take this discussion somewhere else with the next question. It seems to me there's 7 notes in music, and then you've got your sharps and incidentals. So, how many original melodies can we come up with after a while? John Lennon at one point in time said he felt like we were plumb out of, like there was nowhere else we could go. He said this like maybe 20-some years ago before he passed away, back in the late 70s, before he passed away. He once made a comment to that, and I think he was being serious too. That he felt like we'd kind of run through everything we could possibly run through.
And as we well know, especially doing this show, you know, we haven't run out. You know, artists, you know, whether it's Alabama Shakes or Radiohead or Blur, they're still continuing to find new ways to use those limited number of notes, put them together with, you know, with the arrangements they do and the orchestrations they do, and somehow make it music continue to be exciting.
I guess so.
You know.
And true. I do hear things today that still inspire me. And I sometimes wonder, well, is it because sometimes I say, this reminds me of such and such, not in melody, but just in tone.
In tone, yeah.
And how it emotionally makes me feel. But But could it be that I'm also picking up on melodies that I've heard before?
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, you know, there's been all this talk about Led Zeppelin of late. Now, there are some songs, like I said, some examples like Led Zeppelin's Dazed and Confused, deliberately ripped off, was deliberately ripped off from Jake Holmes. You know, his Dazed and Confused, deliberately. There's no getting around it.
Yeah.
Okay. But because of some of these incidents, some people are saying, "Oh, Led Zeppelin ripped off this, Led Zeppelin ripped off that," and some of these accusations I feel are way off base. It's like, okay, no. You might have some tiny little chord structure here that's similar, but tons of songs do this. Trust me, you don't have a case here.
Yeah.
Some of the accusations I think are way off base. So you know, the thing is, it's kind of like if you look hard enough, you might find similarities in just about anything. If you look hard enough, you might be able to find something.
If that's your bent, that's what you're.
If that's your bent,
yeah.
So it's kind of like, how far do we go?
Right.
How far does this go?
Yeah.
And maybe the upside about all this, I think that the lack of music education in our country kind of plays into this. And maybe there's a point where people are going to, maybe people will become a little bit, this will force people to become more musically educated.
Yeah.
It will force recording artists to be more musically educated and know a little bit more about their history, the history of what they're doing.
Musical, not only the ability to play musical instruments, but musical literacy is something that I think we both talked about. I think it's very rare, and at least in the public school system now.
Yeah, of course.
There are some, you know, like creative, like high schools and stuff where they focus on the arts and stuff, and those are great. And I've met some of those kids. I know we've seen some of them at NAMM and stuff like that, and I've talked to some of the teachers, and there the kids are, you know, you have young students are learning how to play, you know, Chuck Berry or the Beatles or the Beach Boys, and they are learning about music's past, but that's by no means, you know, probably the majority. That's not the rule.
It's the exception.
So, yeah, and unfortunately that you know, that's not the case. But I think, you know, maybe kind of to wrap up this whole discussion, I think what we'll have, this issue is going to evolve, but I think, like you say, I think the solution is in people working together. Like, it's not always intentional, like you're saying. A lot of times the artist is just trying to do a good song, create something, and they're not necessarily trying to steal something, they're trying to create something.
Yeah.
So, you know, and hopefully in the interest of artists continuing to want to exploit their own talents and kind of, you know, move things forward, that they're going to not feel stifled that they can't create and release that music commercially.
Yeah. I have a feeling we're going to be discussing this in the future.
I'm sure we will be.
Okay.
Yeah. To be continued, right?
To be continued, yes. And tell us what you think. Give us your thoughts on this topic and how you feel about it. What did you think of the two cases that we've discussed here, the two main ones with Sam Smith and with Robin Thicke? And what are some of the songs you've noticed that you think sound way too similar, way too close to each other? Tell us what you think. So, anyways, till next time. I'm TJR. Thanks so much for... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I'm Robert Kinsler. I cut you off, sorry.
It's okay. Thanks so much for watching. And thanks for sharing the show with all your friends on Facebook and Twitter. We'll talk to you again sometime.
See you later, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.